So we're lucky today to have Tim Ferriss join us. He's best known for his book, The 4-Hour Workweek, which we just found out is back on the bestseller list, along with The 4-Hour Body. So that's really exciting. Congratulations. And Wired Magazine called Tim the Superman of Silicon Valley for his manipulation of the human body. So that's a little note on what's to come here. You should also know he's a tango world record holder and a former national kickboxing champion. So be careful or dance. Once again, thank you to Ryan for making the introduction so we can have him here today. And really thank you to Tim for supplying us with all of the books. They were free, and he sent them to us. That was really awesome and generous of him. And it's created quite a bit of buzz around the office, and I won't say why, but you might all know. So we're very happy to have you here today. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm very excited to be here today. This is actually my first presentation ever on the 4-Hour Body in the new book, so it may be a bit rusty as we move ahead, but I'll try to keep this very short and then jump straight into Q&A, and we can talk about anything that you would like to talk about. So the 4-Hour Body, you see here, the masochism comes first, then self-experimentation. They tend to go together, and then the scientific method. And we can certainly talk in the Q&A if you want about how n equals 1 can actually be a good place to start in terms of scientific exploration. All right, so we're going to start with a video, and then I'll explain the video afterwards. It's a very, very short video, but I think it'll be instructive. Oh, so we don't have any audio, apparently. It's turned up on here, but I'll tell you what, you don't need the audio to see what's going on here. So this is in Cape Town, South Africa. I'll provide some narration. And what's very curious about this is it doesn't hurt. So they used anesthetic, and past the skin, you don't have any pain sensors, you don't have any pain receptors in the muscle itself. But that's the depth, and you'll see the purpose of this in just a moment. Part of the reason I did this in Cape Town was because I didn't have to sign 500 pages of liability waivers and wait 6 months to get it done. And what they're doing here is inserting a biopsy needle, which is about the size of a ballpoint pen, into the side of my leg. This is the vastus medialis, lateralis, actually. And then applying suction, which will pull the muscle tissue into it, and then they clip it and cut it out. It's about as pleasant as it looks. I still have a scar on my right leg from this. There is a purpose for this madness, which I will talk about in just a moment. All right. So that's Tim Tartar. Those are 3 muscle samples. And this is then frozen using liquid nitrogen, and it's tested in a myography lab. And you're able to see a number of very interesting things, including the separation of muscle fiber type and enzymes, which we'll come to in a second. You're also able to look at the actual speed of muscular contraction for your different fibers. So why is this important, or why is it interesting at the very least? And I'll show you why. So this is a graph, and I'll give a little bit of context for this. Yeah, exactly. So I did a number of tests, genetic tests, 23andMe, Navigenics, etc., to see what my muscle fiber type would be, or how quickly I could at least gain muscle or become an Olympic class sprinter. And the bad news was I had what's called a nonsense allele for a SNP that codes for fast-twitch muscle fiber. So in other words, sorry pal, can't gain muscle quickly, you're not going to be an Olympic sprinter. But the good news is you have a genetic preference for endurance. Sweet. Okay, maybe I could be a good endurance athlete. Well, so that's what the test told me. That was my genotype. Lo and behold, my phenotype here, the actual reality when I pulled up muscle fibers, these are enzymes that limit for endurance. So if you look at Kenyan runners, etc., they have crazy levels of these enzymes. So you can see South African antelope is way up there in red. Endurance athletes, pretty high up there. And then Tim Ferriss, poor Tim Ferriss, is below 0. Now, I wasn't clear on how that could be possible until I realized that the baseline is percentage of untrained humans. So basically, I am worse than Homer Simpson for endurance training purposes. All right. So what does this point out? This points out a few things. Number one, the genetics tests were either wrong or you can change your genetic predisposition through training, because there's a separate slide that I don't have here, but I actually had quite a lot of fast-twitch muscle fiber. Most of it was type 2A, and you're able to produce that through training, all right? And this is part of the reason that I went around the world searching for outliers, and I'll come back to why outliers are so important. And I'll show you one of them in just a moment. So this photograph had a big impact on me, and I'll explain why. So this girl, high school girl, 132 pounds, and she is a runner. She's a short distance runner. This was sent to me to illustrate a particular exercise called the torture twist. If anyone wants to try that, I'll tell you how to do it. Everyone hates it, but it's very, very effective for abdominal strength without gaining a lot of size, which is very useful for runners among other types of athletes. She's 132 pounds, high school girl, looks pretty normal by all estimations. She can deadlift 405 pounds for repetitions. She's not a powerlifter. She's a 100-meter sprinter. Okay, so this made me feel very unmasculine, and I decided to take powerlifting much more seriously. And I was able to go from about 300-pound limitation in the deadlift to 650 or so in 12 weeks. So when you start to look for the extremes, you realize that there's a tremendous amount of flexibility in how you develop your physical, not only appearance, but performance. And the changes can be really, really, really fast if you have good data. So the 4-Hour Body was a quest over 3 years to basically apply all the split testing, multivariate testing that you guys would be familiar with in blood contacts to the human body and see what you find. And you end up spotting some pretty interesting patterns. So the guiding tenet is from our friend Mark Twain. So whenever you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect. And one of the approaches that I took was to test assumptions by asking, what if I did the exact opposite of what is recommended? So an example of that would be to eat nothing but beef and mixed nuts for 21 days and see how it affects your cholesterol, things like that. That's one of the things I did. Had no negative effect. Actually improved my cholesterol profile if you look at the balance of total to HDL. But this was the starting point for everything. This is going to be a very short presentation. Rather than go into all the technicalities of endurance training, or fat loss, or muscular gain, or anything like that, I'm going to talk about the first principles. So the overarching principles that can be applied to anything and most types of behavioral change, regardless of what you want to do. So the first one here is that the extremes inform the mean, not vice versa. How many people here have seen the movie Objectified? Anybody? Okay. Wow, I'm surprised only one. You have to see Objectified. It's a great movie. Also Helvetica, the director, did the same film. Objectified is about design in everyday life. And they interview a team from Frog Design. Some of you may know Frog Design. Many of my friends work at IDEO, Frog Design, these types of product design firms. And they said that they had a client come in at one point, a manufacturer, and they said, well, we're trying to design a new type of garden shear. And our average user is middle-aged woman, 40 to 45, this weight, this type of job, this type of income, so we want you to design for her. And they said, no, we're not going to design for your average because that's meaningless. And I'm sure you've probably heard the joke about Bill Gates walking into a bar and the average net worth is 100 million. Okay, well the mean is usually very, very meaningless. But what you do find is that if you design those shears for the paraplegic and then for the bodybuilder who can't brush his own teeth, if you cover the extremes, then everyone in between can use it. So what I went about doing was really testing the extremes and pushing the envelope. And that led me to some very interesting worlds, like advanced bodybuilding, where people are flying to China to have interleukin-6 therapy to gain 40, 50 pounds of muscle in a month. I don't recommend it. Or reversing injuries. So I would ask questions like, if I had no budget limitations and I had access to the best people in the world, could I reverse all of my injuries in 4 weeks? Ended up taking about 6 months. But what you see here on the right-hand side, you can see all these syringes. Those are 3-inch needles. And these are full of a number of different liquids. One of the cocktails was stem cell growth factors flown in from Israel, IGF-1, among other things, bone morphogenic protein. I don't recommend that one either. And these were injected up and down my spine and in my joints. So I wanted to test the extremes, both the very, very subtle, very, very non-intrusive, and go all the way to the end, and then define the best blends of efficacy and safety. And then, once I tested them on myself, to test them on other people. So I did test, in some cases, tracked several thousand people, especially for the dietary changes. So the statistical significance is actually there for a lot of the data sets. All right, so the second point, some of you, does anyone know who this is? This is Chad Fowler. Very, very good guy. Runs RailsConf, among other conferences, that is. And this is his before and after. And he had what I call a Harajuku moment in the book. It's named after where his particular moment of epiphany took place, where he found himself sitting in Japan, his friends were shopping, and he said to another friend who was overweight, "Doesn't matter what I buy because I'll look bad in it anyway." And then there's this awkward silence. And that was really when the pain became painful enough to catalyze change. But from a method standpoint, the how-to wasn't that important. What was important was he had numerical feedback. He started tracking using calorie counting, heart rate monitors, neither of which I really recommend. Here's the point, though. It doesn't matter. You could track just about anything as long as you have that feedback, even if it's just taking photographs of your food. So it's been found that photo logging your food is more effective than any type of written dietary log, etc. It's a pattern interrupt that gives you the awareness that leads to thousands of consonant decisions, even if you don't try. So if I were to take, let's say, a trainer with an advanced diet program, which usually means complicated, and then someone using their iPhone just to take a photograph of everything they eat before they eat it, if the goal is weight loss, I would actually place my bet on the person with the iPhone. And then loss aversion, the second is very, very important. So for behavioral change, alas, in a country where everybody gets a medal, which I actually think is very sabotaging, we want to talk about rewards. What can I have as a carrot that will get me to change my behavior? In fact, if you look at, let's say, auctions, people will overbid to prevent loss of $100, much more so than they would to gain $100. And there's another example in the book, Trevor Claiborne. I don't know if anyone here knows Trevor, who works at Google. And he was very overweight at one point and began his quest by betting a friend $1 per workout. If they missed a workout, they had to work out together, they had to pay the other person $1. Now, this is a trivial amount of money, but the psychological principle at work was very, very powerful. And now he's running half marathons, having not run 1 mile since high school. So really to focus, if your goal is behavioral change of any type, whether that's getting to running 100 miles, which you could do, I would say, with maybe 4 to 6 months of training, if you can currently do a 10K, I know it sounds crazy, or quitting smoking, or losing the last 5 pounds, it doesn't matter. These are the principles that I would focus on. The how-to is actually much less important than failure-proofing from the beginning with the right psychological principles.